The Bank of Ghana has been clarifying its position on the microfinance meltdown. The governor of the Bank of Ghana today, Deputy Governor, said the new measure will address challenges with the tracking of finances of microfinance companies.
Collaboration with the law enforcement agencies to deal swiftly with illegal financial services or providers.
The Bank of Ghana has revoked the licenses of some 70 microfinance and money lending companies. This has sparked confusion between the bank and operators of microfinance. So how far will this decision by the Bank of Ghana go in resolving these challenges? How sure are we will not go back to this situation? This is today's big story. My name is Aisha Barima. The Bank of Ghana's decision follows companies' complaints since last year over the inability of some microfinance companies to pay back money invested with them by residents. The Bono-Ahafo region, for instance, has witnessed sustained demonstrations since last year over the inability of companies like DKM, God is Love, Justa Motors to pay back money invested with them by residents. Meanwhile, the Bono-Ahafo Regional Security Council is confident the roadmap towards the payment of money to disgruntled customers who have been of some microfinance companies in the region will bring an end to weeks of agitations in the region. But the bigger question remains, is the Bank of Ghana's decision key to resolving these challenges? Let's listen to the Deputy Governor of Bank of Ghana, Millicent Na, at the press conference today.
The bank, first of all, is reviewing the entire process of licensing microfinance institutions. Two, we're also intensifying our intelligence network. All regional offices of the Bank of Ghana are being resourced with staff to improve surveillance of the microfinance companies. Three, we are improving our collaboration with the law enforcement agencies to deal swiftly with illegal financial services or providers. And the last but not the least, to intensify our public education consistent with the Bank of Ghana GOG financial literacy objectives in collaboration with your good selves.
For God is love, I don't want us to deliberate too much. We've gone very far with the process. They were in court yesterday, but unfortunately, you know, court and technicalities. The case have been redone at the next week. I'll be rescheduled for next week. We hope we'll bring a closure to this matter. And then when the court directs, then all of us, including us and God is love, we must comply with the court directive.
So the assurance to their depositors who are demonstrating.
But what we can guarantee is that they have refused to tell us how much deposit they have mobilized. We know what we have, and we have our own way of assessing what deposits they have. But when the court gives a directive, we will all obey it.
This is today's big story. We'll be doing some analysis soon. Kuku Aban with the business desk will join us soon with some analysis. We'll also be speaking with Gamthing, a representative of microfinance companies, and we'll also be speaking with the CEO of Dealers Finance to do some analysis with this decision taken by the Bank of Ghana and how far that will resolve our issues. We'll take a break and we'll do that afterwards. Let's do some analysis now. Yao Jimfi is with Gamfin. Good evening, and many thanks for your time on today's big story.
Good evening.
Mr. Jimfi, quickly, let's look at what you make of the Bank of Ghana's justification today of their decision. Will that cool your tempers?
In a sense, that will not cool our tempers. But what is happening now is that, as I've spoken to one of your sister stations about it, they gave us a chance to make amends by making sure that we get all the documentation to get our papers and then make sure we get a full license. And so they have done their bit. But I'm very sad for some of the institutions, as some of them have very good prospects. But unfortunately, they couldn't make the match. All is not lost in the sense that they can restart the process at some point if they want to come back as an institution.
You gave Bank of Ghana an ultimatum to resolve this issue. So what next for you after this justification?
We gave them the ultimatum. Not necessarily we give them the ultimatum. It's their responsibility to be doing that kind of checks on us from time to time. And so for us, we will still continue to engage with them and make sure we find appropriate solutions to it, because the kind of role microfinance is playing in this our society is so very significant, and we don't think we should be sweeping issues over the carpet and just forget about them. So we'll continue to engage them and find appropriate solutions at some point. Yeah.
Mr. Jimfi, he's from Gamfin. We also told Ken Thompson is also on the line. He's a CEO of Delex Finance. He also helped us do some analysis with this issue. Briefly, your impression about the Bank of Ghana's justification today. Mr. Thompson, if you're on the line, I'm asking you of your quick impression about the Bank of Ghana's decision. I think we're having a problem with our phone line, so try and get Ken Thompson back on the line to do some analysis. We'll also be speaking with Kuku Aban of our business desk to explain to us what the Bank of Ghana has been saying, and we'll also be crossing over to the Bono-Ahafo region to check what's happening with the demonstration that has been going on in that region. We'll take a break. We'll be back shortly. This is today's big story. Let's get onto the phone lines and speak with Mr. Ken Thompson. He's CEO of Delex Finance. Good evening. We appreciate your time on today's big story.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You have heard the Bank of Ghana's explanation and steps outlined to deal with the situation at hand. What are your quick impressions about this?
You know, I think the Bank of Ghana, what they've done is a step in the right direction, because you see, fundamental to any financial system, and the financial system is important to this country, is credibility. So when you have a situation where you have institutions that are not credible, being allowed to operate, and the whole system, and it affects everybody from other microfinance companies, finance houses, banks. And in a country where we are trying to get people to move from an informal to a formal financial system, it's important that we have institutions that are credible. It's very, very important to have institutions that are credible. But what I'll say is that with the list, one thing that was missing was I didn't know where these institutions are. And I would have been nice to say that these institutions are here, there, everywhere, because quite a few of them are able to operate under the radar before they are found out. So it would be nice to have known where exactly they were located, so we can all look out for them. But I think it's a very step in the right direction.
Accusations that the Bank of Ghana could have done a lot to avert the situation before it gets out of hand. Is the Bank of Ghana overwhelmed with the issue, or it's simply being reluctant to take proactive measures to avoid some of these things?
I don't know what internal challenge the Bank of Ghana has. All I can say is a step in the right direction, and all I can say is that they really need to put in mechanisms to ensure that any institution like that is rooted out very quickly, because invariably you end up with people who have put money into this institution. Then the issue becomes how to get their money back. And normally, these institutions operate in areas where people have relatively lower incomes. So if somebody loses 200 cedis, it's a lot of money for them, and that's not good. It's not good at all. So I would hope that the Bank of Ghana has put in systems to really fish out these institutions promptly.
Residents have died in the Bono Ahafo region. I mean, from these continuous demonstration by residents to demand for their money. Going forward, what should be our guide?
You see, what I've said is, and I've said this so many times, the Bank of Ghana can put in regulation. The Bank of Ghana can have a man in every town, every city, every village. But if it's too good to be true, it is not true. So if you go to an institution where they're offering to give you 10% a month or 5% a month, your first question should be, but what are they doing with my money to be able to give me 5% a month? What are they doing with my money to be able to offer me a rate that far exceeds what most institutions are offering? So basically, in the first instance, it's down to our own self-policing. And that's what we fall down all the time. People, institutions prey on our greed, and we fall for it. I mean, you go to an institution which opens on Monday, Tuesday they have 5 stars, Wednesday they have shiny new offices, Thursday they are offering you a fridge if you bring 100 cedis. I mean, any reasonable person should say, but how is this being funded? So self-policing is very, very, very important. And if it's too good to be true, then it's definitely not true. That probably is not true. And that's the mistake we make all the time. Wherever these things have come up, you find that to some extent we have preyed on people's greed. And I'm using G with a small g, people's greed and ignorance. But a lot of people, know that some of these things are not sustainable. And so, self-policing is very, very important.
Fair is it that I've closed down the companies, but for the money, you cannot have them?
It's a tricky one because, you see, we don't have a depositor's insurance scheme yet. I don't think so. It's something that they're trying to put in place. So, invariably, it has to be paid by somebody. I mean, who pays it? The government? Should the government be responsible for bailing out every business that fails? It's not possible. Some citizens take certain risks, and they must accept that if they lose money, they have to bear responsibility for it. Then somebody else who has a corn mill will say, well, my business collapsed, government should bail me out. Or a hairdresser will say, well, my salon burnt, I should be bailed out. So it's a very tricky situation. I mean, why should there be an exception made? I really don't understand. I don't really understand why an exception should be made in this case, because the people went on their own volition and they made those investments. And if those companies collapse, we can't expect the government to pick up the bill, because there are also other institutions that have collapsed, which the government hasn't picked up. Why should an exception be made? Why should an exception be made?
Well, many thanks to you, Mr. Ken Thompson, CEO of Delex Finance. We truly appreciate your time on today's big story. In the studio with me is Kuku Aban with our business desk. Many thanks for your time in the studio. Kuku, you have been at the press conference by the Bank of Ghana. What measures have they been outlining?
Well, they outlined 4 measures, and these include a review of the licensing processes before the microfinance companies are finally giving their certificates. And the first one, that's been the reviewing of it. Under it, they want an approval by the management of Bank of Ghana so that they would have the mandate to lift the veil of on the company, so that one will be able to tell the owners of the microfinance company. So if they are in distress in any way and they can't pay deposits, they can go after the allied institution of these owners. Some of them have companies that they own, they have other assets so that they can use it to defray the debt of depositors. And also they want them to put down guarantees before they give them the final approval. So that's the very first review they want to undertake. The second one is an intensification of their surveillance mandates in the regions across the country. And they want to employ a lot more people to, if you like, staff their offices, give them equipment, and also they're talking about some intelligence agencies that they want to collaborate with so that they can monitor the activities of these institutions across the country. Because according to them, some of the institutions start, like somebody wants to operate, if you like, a restaurant or a cement company. And the next minute, they hear they are taking deposits from people. They start fund clubs, and they mention a number of them that started as fund clubs. And then the next minute they are taking deposits from people. So they want to be able to monitor so that they step in as quickly as possible before it gets this bad.
This situation.
Yeah, because they've received a lot of flack for sitting back
and waiting till this time to react.
Yeah, so that's the second. And the third, they're talking about collaborating a lot more with the security agencies so that they can help them clamp down on those people taking advantage of deposit. Because if you go to the remote areas, a lot of them are not that enlightened about these. They hear that they are getting this
in return
interest, then
so they want to deposit their money.
And with the Ponzi schemes, usually, those who go in very early, they get what is promised.
Exactly.
And then they go spread
to motivate
the message.
The others.
They become ambassadors.
It's a trick.
It's an interesting trick. And others jump on board and then
because
they
they've
deposit.
seen the dividend.
Mansa got a vehicle out of this or got so much, so we also want to get in there. So they want to clamp down on them earlier.
Those things.
Before it
It's
busts.
interesting you find those things more in the rural areas.
Exactly.
Not in the cities.
Yeah, and I spoke with Mr. Raymond Amanfo. He's the outgoing head of the other financial institutions supervision department. And according to him, the checks they've done indicate that most of these farmers, it was very predominant in the western region, and then they clamped down on them. And most of the farmers in the Sefi areas, they actually hail from the Bonohafo region. So these Ponzi schemers, if you like, relocated to the Brongafo region because that's where they hail from. Most of them will go back. So then they decided to pitch camp there. Now these people have also gone back to the place and they are able to get all of them. And they are remote. And because of Bank of Ghana's inability to monitor extensively, they are flourishing there. So the fourth and final, step or measure they want to put in place is the education. So that people would know that, no, this interest you are offering is not sustainable.
And it's too good to be true.
It's too good to be true. So they will ask some questions. They got to know about God is Love and the other illegal ones that are operating. They are not legal because of some inquisitorial nature of some people there calling the Bank of Ghana to ask a few questions. That's how come they got to know that these companies are also operating. So is it just
clamping down those companies or taking some legal action against them?
Some of them are in court. God is Love, for instance, was in court today. It's been adjourned. And because the Bank of Ghana doesn't have, the mandate, doesn't have the powers to close their businesses or get them to pay some money, they have to go through processes. It's the court's order that can, compel the microfinance, those illegal operators to do certain things. So it wants to get the monies back so that the depositors can get their monies. But it has to go through processes before it does that. Even those legal ones, it cannot get the monies for them because he tells me these microfinance companies don't have their monies lodged with the central bank. Their monies are with the banks, the individual banks. Exactly. So they can get a court order, compel them to pay
their monies,
but
the Bank of Ghana cannot do that.
But they cannot step in there. And also, if it gets to a point where it realizes that the monies are exhausted, because DKM, for instance, is coming out that the deposits they've taken amounts to about 113 million Ghana cedis. But the checks, the audits done so far indicates that they have about 10.7 million only.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the rest?
The rest, some of them are in fixed assets.
Wow.
But the Bank of Ghana cannot at the moment tell whether those fixed, assets can
amount to
exactly
that kind of money.
So there's a lot going on right now. And so if it gets to that stage and they have to sell or liquidate their assets.
But there are those who feel that Bank of Ghana could have, checked this without it getting to this extent. And so we know it's been outlining to us the 4 steps they want to take to avert a recurrence. But what is their response to people who are accusing them of not being proactive enough to check some of these things?
Today, when we tried to probe and put this to them, that they also sat aloof for too long, they were on the defensive a bit, because according to them, they don't have so much powers.
Okay.
There are some bills before Parliament. They're hoping if they get passed as soon as possible, it will give them some clout to be able to close down firms that they think are flouting their regulations. Even those illegal ones that they think are flouting their regulations, they can do certain things about them. Those illegal ones, they can collaborate with the security agencies to clamp down on them as well. But now they don't. Right. But if you look at the measures they're trying to put in place with the surveillance and trying to go across the country, in a way they are admitting that they haven't done very well. That's the second bit, and even the third bit. If the education bit, we can help in that. But the second and third tells me that they acknowledge that they haven't done enough. That's why they have to extend their operations, go across the country.
But these are just steps that have been outlined.
Exactly.
Did they tell you how they intend to make these measures work, or it's just say and just sit down and watch?
The hope is now that by the end of the first quarter of this year, this would have been approved by the management of the Bank of Ghana. And if it's approved, then they can do certain things. It will give them a lot of, clout and a lot of vigor to go out there and do these things. But currently, as it stands, they can't do much.
Do they have an execution plan, the Bank of Ghana?
That's according to Raymond Amanfo. Because what it tells me is that most of these financial institutions, even the banks, have gone through such difficulties before. And they don't just step in to get them closed down or anything like that. They have to run through a few processes. Maybe you have some cash stashed with a particular bank. They have to be able to ascertain that and whether they can get those monies paid before they can later take the other steps. So it's like, okay, now where are their monies? Into what assets have they, invested these monies? They have to do an audit and have an understanding of all these before they step in to take some drastic measures. So, for instance, DKM, they tell me, has been able to so far pay about 50% of their depositors.
Okay.
Yes. So the next stage is to find out, okay, the other monies they have, will they be able to take care of the rest of the money?
Right.
If not, what other assets do they have? What other allied companies do they have? Can we go into these ones as well? And if you like, the monies that are involved, get them to pay off these people. Do we have to liquidate the assets? Say we are auctioning their office, we are auctioning their vehicles, so that we'll use the monies to pay off. After that,
the debt.
Then they can also go to court to find out whether the court would grant them an order to lift the veil behind the company, or to lift the veil on the company, so that they will know the persons behind the company.
The deals.
Those persons, do they have some businesses that they are running? Can we liquidate those businesses as well?
So we can use the money to pay the debt.
But then if these measures that they are proposing or are approved by their management, then they will be able to, going forward, do a lot more than seek approval from their management, because then it will be a requirement before you are giving your final certificate. You would have agreed that this is what will happen if you are unable to pay depositors.
And if you flout it,
these
the
are the
law
consequences
will take
and
its
so
course. Well, many thanks to Kuku Aban. Kuku Aban is with our business desk, and we've been talking about the back and forth of Bank of Ghana and microfinance companies and people who save with them, and the fact that 70 of them have been closed down, but monies have not been given out to people who have invested in those microfinances. Bank of Ghana says it is putting in place 4 measures. One, to review the licensing process, and then also to intensify its intelligence and surveillance operations across the country. It also says that it wants to collaborate with law enforcement agencies and then also step up public education, and that's their plan in dealing with these occurrences. This is today's big story. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Have a good evening.